Good evening and welcome to this week's Parish News programme. First of all, I hope we're going out live on all the channels we should be this evening, and I'll apologise that this evening's programme is a little bit shorter than normal as we have had some technical difficulties in the last 24 hours. I'm also aware that the live stream of yesterday evening's service didn't go out properly on all channels, so I do apologise for that. Unfortunately, one of the software packages we used to do the broadcast did not function properly, and there's been quite a lot of investigations over the last 24 hours, and we found out that something called an application program interface, or an API, was updated by one of the software providers on Thursday, and that meant that things didn't happen. So with the help of one of our other software providers, we've actually rectified that now and hopefully back to working normally. Firstly, tonight then, I'd like to touch on the annual meeting, which is going to be held on the 30th of August. As some people will know, this is normally held in April each year, but due to the coronavirus, it was not possible to meet. And the temporary deadline, or a temporary deadline of October, was set to enable us to hold the meeting later. Now, October is fast approaching, so we thought we better get the annual meeting done and out of the way. We sent out an email to everyone on our parish distribution of all the key paperwork. There are a number of vacancies this year to fill, such as church wardens, which have to be filled each year, deanery synod and PCC members. The PCC members and deanery synod are usually appointed for a number of years, whereas church wardens are an annual appointment. So if you are interested in standing as a church warden, a member of the PCC, or a representative at Deanery Synod, you should have all the paperwork. All you need to do is get it completed, get a proposer and seconder, and get it back to me by the 29th of August. To stand for these roles, though, you need to be on the church electoral roll, which is the regular membership of the church. As we're becoming a charity, a registered charity, in the next few months, everyone will also need to sign a formal trustee declaration to say that they are a fit and proper person to be a charity trustee. On your nomination forms, I say you need to get somebody to propose and second you, and those also need to be members of the church electoral roll. And then when they're completed, get them to me at 116 High Street by 5 p.m. on Saturday the 29th of August. Of course, if anybody's got any questions at all about the forms or completing them, do give me a call. I will be happy to help. So some of you who've not been involved in the church long, or not involved with the church at all on a daily basis, might wonder what a PCC is, what it does, and so I thought I'd start this evening's programme with a short explanation of what a PCC is, how it's made up, and what it does, and what its responsibilities are. So what is the PCC, or the Parochial Church Council? The PCC works with the minister in promoting the mission of the church. This includes taking forward the mission action plan. The minister in charge of the parish and the PCC have a duty to consult together on matters of general concern and importance to the parish, and to cooperate in promoting in the parish the whole mission of the church, whether that's pastoral, evangelistical, social or ecumenical. This includes almost everything to do with the church's work in the parish and its relationship with the deanery and the diocese. The PCC is responsible for the care, maintenance and repair of the church, churchyard and all movable objects, and has overall charge of all expenditure. PCC members are also trustees, which entails various responsibilities under charity law. So, who is on the PCC? All clerks in holy orders, beneficed or licensed to the parish, deacons or lay workers licensed to the parish, readers licensed to the parish and on the electoral roll of the parish, church wardens, who automatically become members of the PCC as soon as they are elected at the annual meeting, rather than having to wait until they are instituted later in the year, and lay members of Deanery Synod who are also on the electoral roll of the parish. Lay representatives of the parish are also elected at the annual parochial church meeting. They are elected for a term of 3 years. This works on the basis whereby a third of the PCC retire and are elected to the PCC each year at the annual meeting. The PCC can also appoint or co-opt members who can be clerical or lay people. If this happens, the total number of co-opted must either be less than 1/5 of the elected members on the council or 2 people, whichever is the greater. The PCC should also have a standing committee. The standing committee has the power to transact the business of the PCC between meetings, subject to any directions given to it by the PCC. There should be at least 5 people on the standing committee. The minister and church wardens are automatically members. The PCC can appoint 2 of its own members also to be on the standing committee, but this is usually fulfilled by the secretary and treasurer. In our parish, we have 7 members on the standing committee, as we have 2 churches and 4 church wardens. So there you go. That's a quick run through on the PCC, how it's made up and its duties. Of course, if you've got any questions, do ask myself, the parish secretary, Lindsay Wiles, or our rector, Brother Alistair. So there you go. That's everything you need to know about the PCC in 2 minutes. And yet, when you keep saying PCC, it does get a bit tongue-tied at times. But I thought that might be helpful just to explain what the PCC is. So it is the management body of the church. And it's all set down in church representation rules, how we have to form a PCC and run the PCC. In fact, here's the lovely green book. You can't see it because I've got a green screen, so it's disappearing, but this is called the church representation rules. You remember last week we heard from Janet on how she got interested in art and some of the artists that have influenced her paintings. This week, Janet's going to tell us a bit about when she was introduced to the work of Picasso and Van Gogh.
Hello again. A few weeks ago, I mentioned I went to an art class where the teacher was determined to get me out of my comfort zone and make me less precious. A good way to do that was to introduce me to Picasso. His work started fairly conventionally as he moved through his blue period and his rose period, until he became inspired by African and Iberian sculpture and painted his Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. He became a founder of Cubism. His work was no longer a copy of the real world, but something in addition to it. Later he began to paint his distorted figures and forms, leading to the painting Guernica, depicting the horrors of the Spanish Civil War. I don't think my teacher ever made a Picasso out of me, but here are some of my pictures which were inspired by him. There are many other artists that I love, but the real man in my life is undoubtedly Van Gogh. It started in the 70s when I was young and romantic, and I listened to Don McLean's song Vincent, also known as Starry, Starry Night. It so well evoked the tragedy of this man who wanted to express something of his soul to the world, but the world did not understand him. The line, "This world was never meant for one as beautiful as you," broke my heart, and still does for that matter. His paintings have such vibrancy and movement and express all emotion from joy to deep despair. But he was considered a madman and a failure until his suicide. The quintessential misunderstood genius. Here are some of his wonderful paintings and my poor efforts to copy him. sure some of you do some painting and have some lovely pieces of work. Why don't you take a photograph of them and send them to me, and I'll put them together as a virtual art exhibition. I look forward to seeing your work. Bye for now.
Thanks, Janet, and thanks for sharing your pictures with us. I know for some of those I actually struggled to know which was the Van Gogh and which was the Janet Hall, other than the sunflowers, of course, which was very, very obvious. That's a very recognised painting. So yeah, if you've got some painting or artwork you've done yourself, do share some pictures with Janet, and she can put a bit of an art exhibition together to share with all of us, and we can all enjoy the work that you've been doing. During July we had a really busy time for birthdays, but August seems to be very quiet on this front. So again, this week we have nobody to wish happy birthday to, or any other special celebration to mention. So don't forget, if you're celebrating a birthday or another special occasion, a special anniversary or something, do let us know so we can share with everybody else and wish you well for your day. I'm sure you, like me, are all thinking of all those that have had exam results this week and those that will get them in the coming week, particularly at the current time with the coverage in the news about the systems that have been used. I do hope for most of them that they will be pleased with the results that they get. Today is, however, a special day for the nation, as we've been marking the 75th anniversary of VJ Day, the day on which the Second World War actually finished. You might have thought that we actually marked that on VE Day back in May, but I think many people forget that although Germany surrendered and hostilities finished in Europe on the 8th of May, that the war continued in Japan until the 15th of August, which was when the day hostilities in the Second World War actually finished. But did you know, technically the war didn't end until September the 2nd, 1945, when a formal surrender ceremony and the act of surrender was signed in Tokyo Bay, Japan, aboard the battleship USS Missouri. I thought, as it was VJ Day today, that we should reflect on this, so I've got a little video compilation of material from the Royal British Legion and Movietone News to mark VJ Day.
70 years ago, months after the celebrations in Europe over the German surrender,
the Second World War raged on for the British Army of the Far East in Burma,
Sri Lanka,
India,
Thailand,
Malaysia,
the Philippines,
and Singapore. I had no idea. I thought it was actually over.
The British and Commonwealth campaign in the Far East was the longest of the Second World War and involved
2.5 million troops.
Yet these men are often overlooked.
Their commander, Viscount Slim, famously said,
"When you go home, don't worry about what to tell your loved ones and friends about service in Asia.
No one will know where you were or what it is you did.
You are and will remain the forgotten army."
Imagine that's...
so around 300,000 soldiers in the Far East became prisoners of war.
And 100,000...
100,000.
100,000 of these died as prisoners
before seeing it end. Yeah, it's sad, and it makes you, yeah.
They suffered atrocious treatment in camps,
with food severely rationed and disease rife.
Torture and even execution were commonplace.
Despite their weakened state,
many were forced to construct the now infamous Death Railway.
at a cost of more than 12,000 Allied lives, one man for every sleeper laid. Wow.
This is Movietone. Leslie Mitchell reporting.
Japan has today surrendered. The last of our enemies is laid low. Here at home, you have a short rest from the unceasing exertions which you have all borne without flinching or complaint for so many dark years. We also think at this time especially of the prisoners in Japanese hands, of our friends in the dominions of Australia and New Zealand, in India, in Burma, and in those colonial territories upon whom the brunt of the Japanese attack fell. We rejoice that their sufferings will soon be at an end, and that these territories will soon be purged of the Japanese invader.
The Premier gave out the terrific news at midnight. Comparatively few people heard it. Some even left for work in the morning before radio or papers had put them wise. But it was true. And coinciding with the first VJ Day came the royal opening of Parliament. This was a most appropriate beginning to London's 2 days of official celebration. The cheers for total victory had as their first objective, so to speak, the King and Queen. Though rain did its worst on the drive back, it wasn't quite so bad on the drive to the Houses of Parliament.
"92 days after VE Day, and here we go again in Piccadilly. After 4 years of war with Britain and America, and 37 hours after Russia joined in, Japan cracked. For Chinese the world over, it marked the virtual end of an 8-year war. Crowds jumped the gun on the official victory declaration when news flashed across the world that the Japs accepted the Potsdam surrender terms. But there was an if tacked on to the request. They wanted their Son of Heaven preserved, Emperor Hirohito, in whose presence no Japanese is supposed to lift his eyes.
Japan's surrender came in August 1945.
Following the devastating use of the first atomic bombs
on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So that's the one that we always see, the big atomic.
Yeah. Back home in the UK, as victory was announced, thousands gathered in the rain to watch King George VI and the Queen drive down the Mall in an open carriage.
Buildings all over London were floodlit.
And throngs of people crowded the streets of every town and city to celebrate.
Soldiers even formed a conga line down Regent Street.
But those who fought and suffered in the Far East
wouldn't arrive home until well after the victory celebrations were over.
Many prisoners of war had to wait months for ships to bring them home.
And some Allied troops wouldn't return to the UK for nearly 2 years after it was over. And they've already been there for God knows how many years.
70 years later, we remember them all.
And the Royal British Legion ensures the memory of their contribution
lives on.
Lives on.
Lives on. Yes, that's what we want.
So there we go. That's VJ Day, which was marked the 75th anniversary today. Of course, the event that significantly brought the war in Japan to an end was the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima on the 6th of August and Nagasaki on the 9th of August, as we heard in that piece. The two bombs killed between 129,000 people and 226,000 people, most of whom were civilians, and thankfully remain the only uses of nuclear weapons in armed conflict. I was this evening going to do a second video report and cover the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but having looked at the images and video, I realised I couldn't possibly broadcast any of it. So I'm going to reflect on it instead. Some will know that the Allies issued orders in July 1945 for the atomic bombs to be used against 4 Japanese cities. On August 6th, the B-29 Enola Gay dropped a little boy on Hiroshima, an embarkation port, an industrial centre that was the site of major military headquarters. 3 days later, to take advantage of favourable weather, the B-29 Boxcar dropped a fat man on Nagasaki, a major military port, one of Japan's largest shipbuilding, repair centres, and an important producer of naval ordnance. Over the next few months, the effects of the atomic bombings killed between 90,000 and 146,000 people in Hiroshima and 39,000 to 80,000 people in Nagasaki. Roughly half of those deaths occurred on the first day. Large numbers of people continued to die for months afterwards from the effects of burns, radiation sickness and injuries, compounded by illness and malnutrition. In both cities, most of the dead were civilians, although Hiroshima had a sizable military garrison. Japan surrendered to the Allies on the 15th of August, 6 days after the Soviet Union's declaration of war and the bombings of Nagasaki. It's important for us to remember and reflect on these events in our history, whilst looking back. The massive loss of life, both in the dropping of the bombs and in war generally, is nothing to celebrate. It does give us a real good reason and need to strive for peace throughout the world, and the need to resolve our differences by persuasion and negotiation and not by force. So, as we've marked these 75th anniversaries over the last year, let us be grateful for the peace that we enjoy today, even in these difficult times of coronavirus. I do hope on Remembrance Sunday this year that we'll be in a better situation than we have been for the last few months, and we can remember all those 75th anniversaries that have happened over the last few months. So, by way of a memorial, our final video this evening is a compilation, all from things that have happened today. First of all, from the Royal Hospital at Chelsea, a fly past of the Red Arrows over Belfast, although I appreciate they should have flied over a lot of other places today, but because of the weather they couldn't. Something from the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, and Reveille played on Bury Mount at Towcester.
Encounter a lot of difficulty from Japanese snipers. They hide in the trees. They kill lots of people. Snipers, well-trained shooters, they kill people.
If you were sick, they didn't recognise you. They only fed to those people that worked. And so anyway, what we done, we shared everything. We shared the food. When we got there, all the chaps, all the other blokes had washed, and they had their best glad rags on, you know, and they were all smartened up, and they lined up, and we walked in, and the officer, our sergeant officer in charge of the camp, he came over, and he said, "The war is over," and he shook our hand, and you're free. It was all right, yeah.
I can imagine that how brave they were, how hard did they work, and how tough they were. I can imagine that.
သူတို့ကိုရှေ့ဆက်ကုနာပြောလို့ပေါ့ဒီမကြီးလက်ကောင်ကနေပြီးတော့ကိုတိုက်ကိုပြည်ကိုအကျိုးဆောင်နေတော့ကျွန်တော်ထမ်းဆောင်နေတော့ဟိုပြုတ်
Remembering your soldiers who contributed or sacrificed or did the supreme sacrifice for the nation, for a cause, we must remember it.
When you go home,
tell them of us and say,
for your tomorrow
we gave our today.
And so we've come to the end of our slightly shorter programme this evening. First of all, I hope we have been going out on all the channels we should do and it's all worked properly. I'm sure I will know very shortly after the programme if it hasn't. So as we come to the end of our shorter programme this week, don't forget to have a look through the paperwork that's been sent out if you're on the church distribution for the annual meeting, and make those nominations you wish to make as church wardens, PCC and Deanery Synod. To remind you, on Wednesday this week we have Bishop Karen coming to the 10:30 service at All Saints Church, and to remind you that to attend this service you do need to book a place. We're saying it's a ticketed service, but you don't actually get tickets. But what we do need to make sure is that we don't get 100 people turned up when we can only safely seat 45 people under the current arrangements. We do have a handful of seats still left. So if you haven't rung up yet and you'd like to come on Wednesday at 10:30, please do give me a call on 778169. It's on the screen above, and I can book those seats for you. And if you haven't booked a seat, please don't turn up, because we would hate to have to send anyone away. That wouldn't be very nice at all, would it? To remind you that our usual quiz is on tonight at 7:30 on all the same usual places, YouTube, Facebook and Twitter, and you are most welcome to join us for that. Tomorrow at 9:30 our normal Sunday morning live stream service will be broadcast as usual, and 11 o'clock there is the communion service in church at All Saints Church. So that just about wraps everything up for this week. Thank you for joining me. And don't forget, if you've got any stories to share or anything that you want us to tell people about, events, fundraising, special occasions, do give me a call, do drop me an email in ample time for next week's programme. So for this week, I'll say good night, and until 6 p.m. next Saturday, I'll see you then. Bye for now.